Hello, I want to invite you to a discussion on research problem. The discussion will focus on three principal areas of research problem. These are the meaning of a research problem, the types of research problems, and the characteristics of a good research problem. Research problem is an important area in our study of social science research. At the end of any study, students are expected to come up with a research problem that they can empirically investigate, analyze data, interpret the data, and then report their findings. That is why research problem becomes an important topic for discussion, especially for students whose programs of study require them to come up with a research project, or those who intend to pursue further studies at master level and PhD level, where research is a critical component of their study. I want to welcome you to the study. A research problem has been defined differently by different scholars, and I want us to look at some of the definitions that have been put forward. One, the concept research problem has been understood as a statement about an area of concern, a condition to be improved, a difficulty to be eliminated, or a troubling question that points to the need for meaningful understanding. The concept has also been defined as an area of concern that requires a meaningful understanding of a specific topic, a condition, a contradiction, or a difficulty. Lastly, research problem is also conceived as a specific issue or gap in existing knowledge that one aims to address through research. Looking at the three definitions, it is discernible that when you talk about a research problem, it simply means an issue that either nothing or very little is known about, and there's need to understand more about it. And one way of understanding it or gaining insight of what it is by undertaking a research. So that when we talk about a research problem, we basically mean an issue that more information or understanding is needed about, and such understanding can only be achieved by conducting a research. So I want us to understand a research problem simply as an issue that not much is known about, yet there is need to know about it. And one of the ways of understanding it is by conducting a research. Research problem can be of different types. So I want us to look at some of the various types of research problems. One of the types of research problem is called a descriptive research problem. And a descriptive research problem is a research problem that seeks to describe the situation, the state, or the existence of certain specific phenomena. Studies that are descriptive in nature, their main goal is to examine the underlying significance of an event or the existence of a situation or hidden issues. These studies, they utilize research methods such as surveys and opinion polls. This is because answering research questions requires systematic observation of social issues. An example of a descriptive research problem would be like 1. Factors affecting adoption of agricultural technology among small-scale farmers in Kakamega County of Kenya. In such a study, the focus is simply to look at what is it that farmers consider when they are adopting the various types of agricultural technology that are available. The findings of such a study, therefore, would simply describe those particular factors. For instance, if education level of the farmer is a factor, then the study will describe education as a factor. If it is income, they'll do the same. If it is farm size, they'll also do the same. If it is the purpose of production, for instance, whether it is subsistence or commercial production, again, that is what will be described. So such a study will simply identify the factors that affect a given phenomena. The other type of research problem is called causal research problem. This type of research problem focuses on identifying the extent and nature of the cause and effect relationships. And such studies are used to assess the impact of some changes on existing norms as well as processes that are found in society. And the goal here is to identify patterns of relationships between different elements or variables. Here is an example of a causal research problem. The impacts of public participation on the sustainability of community water projects in Laikipia County of Kenya. In other words, the concern here is if we want to understand what makes community-based projects sustainable, we are interested in looking at the causes of that sustainability. In this case, therefore, sustainability is the effect. What then are the causes of that sustainability? So when we look at how public participation leads to that, then public participation becomes the cause. and sustainability of the water projects becomes the effect. So any study that seeks to understand how a particular thing affects the outcome of something, then such study, we call them the causal research problem. The other type of research problem is called relational research problem. And a relational research problem is one that seeks to investigate the correlation between two or more variables. The researcher achieves this by investigating a number of precise characteristics and identify the relationship between them. In this kind of research problem, the study assumes, or the researcher assumes, the existence of some sort of relationship between two variables, which requires investigation. And the aim of relational research is to investigate the qualities or characteristics that exist between two or more variables. An example of a relational study or research problem would be the relationship between family background and performance of women-owned small and medium enterprises in Kilifi County of Kenya. In this case, we are concerned about how is the family background of women entrepreneurs influencing the performance of their businesses. For instance, we want to understand if, say, experience or previous engagement of the family in business is affecting this, or whether the economic status of the family is affecting this. So in this case, we are more concerned about the various factors that are likely to influence the outcome of something. So in relational study or relational research problem, the focus is largely on the relationship between independent and dependent variables. Having looked at the meaning of a research problem and the various types of research problems, I now want us to direct our attention to the characteristics of a good research problem. This is also an important area because not all research problems might meet the requirements to be certified as a research problem. And that is why it is important to understand the various characteristics or qualities that a research problem needs to meet for it to be considered a good research problem. One is the relevance. In other words, the research problem should be chosen, rather should be relevant to one's field of study or inquiry, and it must be supported by a number of recent peer-reviewed studies in the field. It's expected that scholars enhance and expand knowledge in their areas of specialization. And one way of doing that is to engage in continuous research so that the findings of studies will add onto the available body of knowledge that exists in a given area. While doing so, it is expected of researchers to ensure that the areas that they seek to undertake studies on, and therefore bring knowledge are those areas that are relevant, so that a relevant research problem should be one that have a positive impact by deepening knowledge in a given field of study. And the impact can be practical, such as direct application of the results in the field, or it can be conceptual, that is, where the work advances the field by filling the knowledge gap. So that relevance is important. If, say, you are doing a study on economics, the expectation is that the research problem that you have chosen must really advance knowledge in that field of economics. If it is sociology, the expectation is the same. If it is criminology, the same. If it is, say, in community development, again, the expectation is the same. In other words, relevance is key. You cannot, for instance, be undertaking a study on mathematics, but the research problem you have chosen speaks to, say, sociology, and then yet you insist that you are advancing knowledge in mathematics. That may not meet the requirement of relevance, which is a good characteristic of a research problem. The other characteristic of a good research problem is that one of the timeliness. In other words, a good research problem should be related to the current needs in the field of study and should also be well suited for the present status of the issues. We expect studies or researchers to engage in studies that speak to issues that are affecting society currently. And therefore, identifying a current question in the field and supporting the problem with the recent literature can demonstrate the timeliness of the research problem. A researcher must therefore explore what topics are being covered in current literature in the field of study to help in identifying recent topical areas of research. Current is important. We need not dwell so much on studies that have already been done because the knowledge about them is available, unless it is identified that there are certain gaps that previous studies did not bring out. Then that now becomes current, even if the issue happened some times back. Let me give you an example of Kenya. In Kenya, for instance, there have been several cases of political assassinations, beginning with so many cases such as Tom Mboya and others. Assuming, for instance, that there are certain aspects about these assassinations that had not been previously known, and therefore there is need to bring them to the fore, then a study focusing even on an event that occurred several years back, but certain information about such events were not known, then again, that study would still meet the characteristic of relevance or timeliness. Therefore, when you talk of timeliness, we simply don't strictly mean that it must be an issue that is happening today in Kenya. It could be an issue that happened sometimes back in society, but certain information about them wasn't clearly known. And therefore, research is being undertaken to enlighten the public about those aspects that were unknown before. So in that case, it will still qualify as current information. For example, in Kenya today, there's a lot that is going on around cults and utopianism in the religious sector, with the case of Shakahola at the coast being on the forefront. Indeed, that is a debate, and someone or a researcher would be interested in understanding what is it that is leading to such religious cultism or utopianism, so that a study can be formulated to understand more about it. And in doing so, so much information will be brought to the surface that will enlighten the society as to why such phenomena is happening in society. The other important characteristic of a research problem is that one of novelty. Novelty simply means the creativity and originality or uniqueness. So a good research problem should be on issues that have not been answered sufficiently by other researchers. And it should be original, it should be unique, and should seek to address a gap in knowledge. How do we get to know that some issues have not been researched on? One way of doing so is to undertake very, very extensive and exhaustive literature review. When you undertake literature review, it will help us understand areas that have been researched on and those that have not been researched on. So we pick those issues that previous studies have ignored, and those now becomes our areas of research. We then formulate a research problem out of that. That is what we mean by novelty, creativity, uniqueness, and addressing the gap in knowledge. Otherwise, the purpose of research is not merely to regurgitate knowledge, that is, to keep on reproducing what others have done. No. The purpose of research is to bring something new that was not known before. Therefore, novelty is a very, very good indication, a very, very good focus that researchers need to look into. How, again, we can come about this is also holding discussions with experts in a given area of interest. Indeed, experts are aware of the issues that they are facing, and in doing so, it is possible for them to know issues that appear to be disturbing the public and those that very little is known. So, discussion with experts can also reveal to us certain areas that the gap in knowledge still exists. But we can also undertake what we call a replication of an existing study. For instance, if certain things were done earlier and we want to understand whether such issues they are still remaining or they are still relevant today, then we might want to undertake a study on a given area that had been studied before, on the same research problem, and perhaps even using the same methodology. And the goal here is to understand whether there are changes over time. For instance, someone might come across a study, say, that was conducted in the 70s, the 1970s, and the study sought to understand what factors women consider when they're selecting their marital partners. It might be important or necessary for studies to be undertaken today to understand whether human tastes, women taste when it comes to selection of partners, has remained or it has changed. So a study that seeks to use the same study that has been done, but to see whether there are changes on the same, can still be considered as novel because the purpose is to investigate whether there are changes in human tastes, in human values, and in human attitudes over certain things. The last characteristic of a good research problem that we want to discuss is called researchability. Researchability means that an area of research that has been formulated into a research problem must be an area that is researchable. And an area is researchable if it can permit collection of sufficient data to effectively answer research questions. The significance of data in research implies that researchers must establish beforehand whether or not data related to the research problem is obtainable. If it is not possible to obtain data in any given area, then there is no way a researcher will answer the research questions or the research objectives that had been set out at the beginning of the research, because objectives are answered by information or data that's obtained from the respondents or from the study participants. And therefore, if it is completely not possible to get participants and therefore get information about them, then such a study might not in any way be carried out and cannot be called as researchable. Therefore, a researcher should be able to solve the problem with his or her abilities and available research methods, designs, research sites, resources, and time frame. If a research problem has the aforementioned characteristics, that is the one that we had mentioned earlier, that is, it is relevant, it is novel, and it's also current, but it is not searchable, then the entire research cannot be called or termed as a good research, because those other characteristics must be complemented by the aspect of researchability. How are we going to obtain data? Are the methods that we envisage to use going to give us data? Are we likely to get the respondents? Can we access respondents? Are they respondents that are willing or that are able to talk? Or are they respondents that others can talk on their behalf? Such information becomes quite important and relevant and must therefore be considered. So if all that is considered, then we can easily say that the study is searchable. Up to that point, I want to thank you so much for your time and for listening. These guidelines, if followed critically, and of course with the assistance of the instructors, I believe that students will be in a position to come up with a very good research problem. Our next discussion will focus on research objectives and research questions. Thank you for your time. Goodbye for now.